230,000 stone blocks, each one weighing on average 2.5 tons, some of them weighing 80 tons, quarried from living rock, transported across the desert, lifted to heights no builder would attempt today without modern machinery, and set in place with a precision so extraordinary that no mortar was used. The weight of the stone alone holds the structure together, and it has held for 4,500 years without shifting by so much as a fraction of an inch. Now do the mathematics. If the Great Pyramid was built in 20 years, as the conventional timeline tells us, one block had to be quarried, transported, lifted, and positioned every 2 to 3 minutes, continuously, day and night, for 2 decades, without pause, without error, and without the setbacks and delays that every large construction project in all of recorded history has experienced. Without modern cranes or steel cables or diesel engines or laser levels or any of the infrastructure that makes precision construction on this scale possible in the 21st century. 2 to 3 minutes per block. Sit with that for a moment. Feel the weight of it. Not just the weight of the stone, though that weight is almost incomprehensible. 2.5 tons is 5,000 pounds, heavier than a pickup truck, heavier than a large elephant, heavier than almost anything you have moved through your life. Feel the weight of the claim itself, the claim that a civilization working with copper tools and wooden sledges, with rope and human muscle, and organizational systems that predate writing as we know it, EOS managed to produce something that the most advanced engineers on Earth today would struggle to replicate at that speed and at that precision. This is not a small question. It is not a fringe curiosity entertained only by people who want to believe in ancient aliens or lost civilizations. It is the central question of one of the most studied structures in human history. And the answer, after more than 2 centuries of serious archaeological investigation, is still genuinely, honestly, not fully known. The Great Pyramid sits on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, at the edge of the Sahara Desert, visible from miles in every direction, vast and angular against the sky. It was the tallest structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years, from its completion around 2560 BC until the construction of Lincoln Cathedral in England in the 14th century AD, 4,000 years at the top. For perspective, that is longer than the entire span from the height of ancient Greece to tonight. When surveyors first measured the pyramid's foundation in the 19th century, they found something that stopped them. The base of the structure covers 13 acres of bedrock, and that bedrock has been leveled across its entire surface to within less than 1 inch of perfect flatness. The southeastern corner of the base sits approximately half an inch higher than the northwestern corner, across a distance of 750 feet in each direction. Half an inch. This is not the work of people who were guessing. This is not the work of people who were improvising. Modern construction with laser levels and digital theodolites, with the most precise surveying instruments available, rarely achieves this degree of accuracy across this distance. And this foundation was produced by a civilization that, according to the conventional timeline, had not yet invented the wheel for practical transport. The precision does not stop at the foundation. The 4 sides of the pyramid are oriented to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, with an accuracy of less than 1/10 of a degree. The Great Pyramid is more precisely aligned with true north than the Paris meridian, which was one of the most carefully surveyed geographical references in the modern world when it was established in the 18th century. The builders of the pyramid were not approximately pointing north. They were measuring the sky with an exactness that most observers assume belongs only to the age of instruments. How they achieved this orientation is itself a matter of ongoing debate. The most widely accepted explanation involves astronomical observation, specifically the measurement of stars circling the celestial North Pole. By observing the arc of a circumpolar star and bisecting the angle between its extreme positions, a skilled astronomer could determine true north with considerable accuracy. This is technically possible without instruments beyond a plumb line and a sighting device. But it requires sophisticated astronomical knowledge, careful observations sustained over time, and mathematical methods that we have no direct textual evidence of from the period in question. The blocks themselves present what might be the most persistent mystery. The average block weighs 2.5 tons, but that average conceals an enormous range. The limestone blocks that make up most of the pyramid's bulk are on the smaller end. The granite blocks in the interior, particularly in the king's chamber and the passages leading to it, are a different matter entirely. These were quarried at Aswan, more than 500 miles south of Giza. They were cut from living granite, a stone significantly harder than the copper tools the Egyptians are known to have possessed. They were transported down the Nile by boat and then somehow moved overland to the plateau. And then they were lifted, some of them weighing 40, 60, 80 tons, to heights of more than 140 feet above the desert floor, and placed with a precision that means a thin knife blade cannot be inserted between them. No mortar holds these blocks together, no adhesive of any kind. What holds them is contact, the direct surface-to-surface contact of stones that have been cut and dressed to fit each other so precisely that the joint between them is effectively invisible. Achieving this between blocks that weigh the equivalent of a loaded 18-wheel truck using tools made of copper, which is softer than granite, which cannot cut granite without being destroyed in the process, is not simply difficult. It contradicts what we understand about material science. This is worth dwelling on, because it is not a romantic exaggeration. Copper has a Mohs hardness of approximately 3. Granite has a Mohs hardness of 6 to 7. On the Mohs scale, a material can only scratch or cut materials softer than itself. A copper tool cutting granite would be destroyed by the granite before it could make any meaningful impression. Experimenters have tried, using copper tools and abrasive sand, the most commonly proposed workaround, and the results are consistent. The process is extraordinarily slow, prohibitively labor-intensive, and does not reproduce the kind of finish visible on the worked granite surfaces inside the pyramid. Inside the king's chamber, the drill holes tell a particularly pointed story. The drill holes in the granite show spiral grooves, indicating that the drill advanced into the stone at a rate of approximately 1/10 of an inch per revolution. Modern diamond-tipped drill bits under mechanical pressure achieve similar penetration rates. Experimental copper drills with sand abrasive do not come close. The spiral pattern itself suggests a continuous, rotational force of a kind that is extremely difficult to produce manually at the pressure required to cut granite. Something was used to cut this stone. We have not been able to agree on what it was. The logistical questions around the workforce compound the puzzle further. The conventional explanation has, at various points in the scholarly debate, proposed workforces of anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 people, or with the larger estimates, create their own problems. Moving and feeding 100,000 people in the Giza desert requires infrastructure, housing, sanitation, food supply chains, water supply, that should leave substantial archaeological traces. Settlements, refuse heaps, storage facilities, roads capable of handling the constant traffic of supply transport. What has been found is more modest. The workers' village at Giza, excavated over the last few decades, suggests a permanent workforce in the thousands rather than the hundreds of thousands. These were not slaves, as the old narrative held. The evidence suggests skilled, fed, and apparently well-treated craftsmen who were proud of their work and buried with care. But a few thousand people, however skilled, she cannot move 230,000 blocks in 20 years at the required rate. Some researchers have proposed that the actual construction time was longer than the conventional 20 years, that the pyramid took the entirety of Khufu's reign, which may have been as long as 60 years by some estimates. This eases the mathematics somewhat, but does not resolve them entirely. Even at 60 years, the rate of construction required is aggressive by any standard of historical comparison, and the question of how the blocks were raised to their required heights remains as unresolved as ever. The ramp hypothesis has dominated conventional explanations for decades. The idea is straightforward. Build a ramp of compacted earth or rubble, approaching the pyramid at a manageable incline, and drag the blocks up the ramp on sledges using human muscle and rope. Experimental archaeology has confirmed that this kind of system can move heavy stone blocks. It works on flat ground, and it can work on inclines if the angle is gentle enough and the workforce is large enough. But the geometry of ramps for the Great Pyramid creates a problem that grows worse as the pyramid gets taller. To maintain an incline of roughly 10%, steep enough that it barely qualifies as manageable for a multi-ton load, a ramp reaching the pyramid's apex at 481 feet would need to extend for nearly a mile. The volume of material required to build and maintain such a ramp would exceed the volume of the pyramid itself. After construction, the ramp would need to be dismantled and removed, leaving no trace. And the logistics of operating on a ramp a mile long, coordinating the movement of blocks up one side, while teams return down the other, while other teams continue quarrying and transporting and dressing, the organizational complexity staggers the imagination even before you add the issue of where the ramp material went. Internal ramp theories have been proposed as an alternative. Spiral passages or ramps built within the pyramid's own structure that could be filled in as the building was completed. But ground-penetrating radar surveys of the pyramid have not identified voids or passages consistent with internal ramp systems of the required size. The pyramid has been scanned, measured, imaged, and analyzed with technologies that would have seemed like magic to any previous generation. And it has not yielded clear evidence of how its upper sections were built. What it has yielded, particularly in the last decade, is new information that was entirely unexpected. In 2017, an international team of physicists announced the results of a muon tomography survey of the pyramid, a technique that uses cosmic ray muons, particles that penetrate solid rock the way X-rays penetrate soft tissue, to map the internal structure of large objects. The survey detected a large void inside the pyramid above the Grand Gallery, a space at least 100 feet long that had never been documented by any previous survey or excavation. This void, which the researchers called the Scan Pyramid's Big Void, does not correspond to any known passage or chamber in the structure. Its purpose, if it has one, is unknown. Its existence was not predicted by any theory of the pyramid's construction. It is simply there, inside the most studied building in human history, unknown to everyone until machines sensitive to cosmic radiation finally found it. What else is in there that we have not found? What do we not know about a structure we have been studying for more than 2,000 years? The honest answer is that we do not know what we do not know. The pyramid keeps revealing information at its own pace, on its own terms, without regard for the frameworks we have constructed to explain it. The mathematics embedded in the structure are no less challenging than its construction logistics. The ratio of the pyramid's height to the perimeter of its base is approximately 2 times pi, accurate to several decimal places. Pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, is one of the fundamental constants of mathematics. It is irrational, meaning its decimal expansion never terminates or repeats. The Greeks, particularly Archimedes, would arrive at increasingly accurate approximations of pi in the 3rd century BC, nearly 2,000 years after the pyramid was built. The precision with which pi is encoded in the pyramid's proportions is not easily explained as coincidence, though some researchers argue exactly that, proposing that the builders simply chose ratios that seemed visually harmonious and the mathematical relationship emerged accidentally. But pi is not the only mathematical encoding. The pyramid's base perimeter, when divided by twice its height, gives a ratio of pi. The pyramid's height, when multiplied by approximately 43, approximates the Earth's polar radius in a particular unit of measurement. The relationship between the pyramid's base and its apothem, the slant height from the midpoint of a side to the apex, encodes the golden ratio, phi, the proportion that appears in the spiral growth patterns of shells and flowers, and that was formalized mathematically by Euclid centuries after the pyramid stood. The sides of the base, when their lengths are precisely measured, reveal a concavity. Each face of the pyramid is not flat but very slightly bowed inward, visible only from the air at certain times of year when the sun's angle creates shadows that reveal the indentation. This concavity is so subtle that it was not documented until aerial photography became possible in the 20th century. Its purpose is debated. Its intentionality is almost impossible to deny once you know what to look for. Now consider the Sphinx. The Sphinx stands on the Giza Plateau east of the Great Pyramid, carved from a single limestone outcropping, the body of a lion with the head of a human gazing eastward toward the rising sun. The conventional dating places its construction during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, the builder of the second pyramid, around 4,500 years ago. This dating rests primarily on the circumstantial evidence of the Sphinx's proximity to Khafre's mortuary complex and the stylistic similarity of the Sphinx's face to Khafre's known portrait statues. What the stone itself suggests is more complicated. The body of the Sphinx and the walls of the enclosure, cut into the plateau around it, show a pattern of erosion that geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University began analyzing in the late 1980s. The erosion pattern on the Sphinx's body is vertical and rounded, the distinctive signature of prolonged water erosion, of heavy rain falling over a long period and running down the stone surface. The same rounded vertical erosion is visible in the walls of the Sphinx enclosure. Nearby structures of confirmed Old Kingdom date, including the Valley Temple and the Mortuary Temple, show a different erosion pattern. Horizontal wind and sand erosion, consistent with thousands of years of desert conditions. The last time the Gaza region experienced sustained heavy rainfall capable of producing the erosion pattern visible on the Sphinx was the period known as the African Humid Period, a climatic phase that ended approximately 5,000 years ago. If the erosion on the Sphinx was produced by that rain, the statue predates its conventional dating by at least 500 years. Some of Schoch's more ambitious readings of the erosion data suggest the Sphinx may be significantly older, possibly carved in a much earlier period, perhaps as long as 10 or 12,000 years ago, during the end of the last ice age, when the Sahara was green and wet. Mainstream Egyptology has pushed back on this interpretation, pointing out that other mechanisms could produce similar erosion patterns, and arguing that no archaeological evidence of a civilization capable of carving the Sphinx exists from the proposed earlier periods. This is a legitimate criticism, and it is the central weakness of the older Sphinx hypothesis. If the Sphinx was carved 10,000 years ago, who carved it? What culture, what civilization left this enormous monument and then vanished without leaving any other trace that archaeology has yet identified? This is the question that makes the alternative chronology simultaneously compelling and difficult. The pyramid's construction anomalies, the Sphinx's erosion pattern, the mathematical sophistication embedded in the structure's proportions, taken individually, each can be argued away. Taken together, they suggest that something about the conventional story is incomplete. That knowledge was present at Giza in the 4th dynasty that we cannot fully account for by the preceding trajectory of Egyptian development, that the story of how this civilization arrived at the capability to produce the Great Pyramid may be longer and stranger than the standard timeline implies. Go inside the pyramid, if only in imagination. Follow the descending passage that leads from the original entrance on the north face, angled downward into the bedrock below the structure. It leads to the subterranean chamber, a rough-walled room carved directly into the living rock beneath the plateau, unfinished, its purpose still debated. From the descending passage, another corridor branches upward. The ascending passage, climbing at the same angle the lower one descends, as if it mirrors the path into the sky, the way the lower passage reaches into the earth. This ascending passage leads into the Grand Gallery, one of the most extraordinary architectural spaces anywhere in the ancient world. Over 150 feet long, nearly 30 feet high, its walls corbelled inward in 7 overlapping steps that create a soaring vault of limestone above a perfectly straight and level floor. At the top, a low passage leads into the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is built entirely of red granite from Aswan, 500 miles away. Its ceiling is formed by 9 massive granite beams, the largest weighing approximately 70 tons. Above the King's Chamber, invisible from within, now are 5 relieving chambers separated by enormous granite slabs whose purpose is to distribute the pyramid's immense weight away from the room below. The only inscriptions ever found inside the Great Pyramid were discovered in these relieving chambers, painted in red ochre by the work gangs themselves, including the cartouche of Khufu. This is the primary textual evidence connecting the pyramid to its builder. From the king's chamber and the queen's chamber below it, narrow shafts run through the pyramid's body toward its outer faces. For most of documented history, these were assumed to be ventilation channels. But when researchers analyzed their precise angles in the 1990s, what they found changed the interpretation entirely. The shafts are not aimed at the open air in any arbitrary direction. They are aimed at specific stars. The southern shaft of the king's chamber points toward the belt of Orion as it appeared in the sky around 2500 BC, toward Alnitak, the lowest star of Orion's belt, which Egyptian cosmology associated with Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. The northern shaft points toward the circumpolar stars that Egyptians called the imperishable ones, stars that never set, that circle the north celestial pole without ever dipping below the horizon, and that were connected in Egyptian thought with the eternal realm where the pharaoh's soul would reside. When the shafts are not ventilation channels, but carefully aimed astronomical instruments, the king's chamber is not simply a burial room. It is a device, precisely calibrated to locate the pharaoh's journey into the specific regions of the sky that Egyptian theology had identified as the realm of the dead. The precision required to aim a shaft running through hundreds of feet of solid stone at a specific star, calculating the angle in advance, maintaining it through years of construction, reveals a depth of astronomical knowledge that the surviving administrative records do not fully prepare us for. The Orion correlation theory, developed in the 1990s, extends this astronomical dimension further. The three main pyramids of Giza are not arranged in a straight line or in any geometrically simple pattern relative to each other. Menkaure, the third pyramid, is offset to the east in a way that disrupts what would otherwise be a neat alignment. Researcher Robert Boval observed that this offset corresponds closely to the positions of the three stars of Orion's belt, that the pyramids appear to be a ground map of Orion, scaled and oriented to match the constellation. The correlation, while debated in its details, reflects something real about the relationship between the Giza complex and Egyptian astronomical thought. Whatever else the pyramid is, it is oriented to the sky in ways that go beyond the merely practical. The decline is part of this story, and it is one of the most striking features of the archaeological record. The quality of pyramid construction drops sharply after the 4th dynasty. The 5th and 6th dynasty pyramids at Saqqara and Abusia are built of rubble cores faced with limestone casing stones. They are structurally inferior to the 4th dynasty monuments. They eroded more quickly. Several are today little more than piles of degraded rubble, barely recognizable as pyramids. The pyramid of Unas, the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, was described by the 19th century explorer Gaston Maspero as resembling a rubbish heap. Pyramid texts, elaborate religious inscriptions covering the interior walls, appear for the first time in the 5th dynasty pyramids, suggesting that later builders compensated with religious elaboration for what they could no longer achieve in stone. If the pyramid building tradition had been climbing steadily from simple mastaba tombs to step pyramids to the perfection of Giza, why did it immediately and irreversibly decline after the 4th dynasty? If the knowledge and techniques that produced the Great Pyramid were the product of a continuous Egyptian tradition, the decline in quality makes no sense. Skills that develop organically within a tradition do not simply vanish in a single generation. They atrophy slowly, preserved in lesser forms, degraded gradually. The pattern at Giza looks less like organic development and more like inheritance, as if the 4th dynasty builders were working from knowledge they had received, not developed. And when that knowledge passed, what remained was the ability to build pyramids, but not the ability to build them like that. Where the knowledge came from, if not from organic development within the Egyptian tradition, is the question that no framework has yet answered to everyone's satisfaction. The oldest alternative proposal, that it was brought by survivors of a sophisticated pre-dynastic civilization, where possibly one ended by the same catastrophic climate events that marked the transition from the Ice Age to the Holocene, remains controversial precisely because it requires us to accept that a civilization of sufficient sophistication existed before the archaeological record shows any trace of it. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. But in archaeology, the absence of evidence is taken seriously, and the gap between what this hypothesis requires and what the physical record has delivered remains wide. What the physical record has delivered in recent years is the harbour. In 2013, archaeologists working at the ancient port of Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast found what are believed to be the world's oldest papyrus documents, dating to the reign of Khufu. Among these documents, the administrative journals of an official named Mera, who supervised a team of elite workers, are detailed accounts of the transportation of limestone casing blocks from the quarries at Tura to Giza by boat, using a system of canals and waterways. This is direct, contemporary evidence of how at least some blocks were moved. Mera describes sailing with a crew, loading blocks, traveling the Nile, and delivering material to what he calls the horizon of Khufu. This discovery is significant not because it resolves all questions, but because it demonstrates that direct contemporary evidence of the construction does exist and can still be found. Mera's journals tell us something real about how at least part of the work was organized. They confirm that organized literate administration was directing the project. They push back against the most extreme versions of alternative chronology by demonstrating that the builders of the Khufu period were directly engaged in the construction in the way the conventional timeline proposes. But Mera's journals describe the delivery of casing stones, limestone, relatively light, relatively manageable. They do not describe the movement of the granite monoliths in the king's chamber. They do not explain the precision of the foundation, or the astronomical alignment, or the mathematical encoding of the proportions, or the logistics of lifting blocks to the structure's highest points. The journals are a piece of the puzzle, an important piece, but they are not the complete picture. What is the complete picture? The honest answer is that we do not have it. The Great Pyramid is both the most studied building in human history and one of the least understood. It has been surveyed and scanned and measured and analyzed and argued about for more than 2 centuries of serious scholarship. And the central questions: exactly how was it built? What knowledge made it possible? Where did that knowledge come from? And what purpose beyond royal burial did it serve? Remain genuinely open. This is not a failure of scholarship. It is a reflection of the nature of the evidence. The pyramid was built. The stone is there, measurable, real, impossible to dismiss. But the process by which it was built left behind almost no direct documentation. The ancient Egyptians, who left meticulous written records of administrative transactions, of religious ceremonies, of medical treatments and legal proceedings and agricultural yields, left almost nothing about the construction of the Great Pyramid itself. The most studied building in the world is almost entirely silent about its own creation. What it speaks in is geometry, in mass, in precision and alignment and the stubborn physical fact of its continued existence. It speaks in the language of stone, which is the oldest language there is, and that language does not always translate cleanly into the categories of modern inquiry. Every generation of researchers has come to the pyramid with new tools. The 19th century brought systematic survey. The early 20th century brought aerial photography and organized excavation. The late 20th century brought ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, statistical analysis of the archaeological record. The 21st century brought muon tomography and the discovery of Mera's papyri, and increasingly sophisticated chemical analysis that can identify the geographical origin of specific stone blocks with remarkable precision. And each generation has learned something, has found something the previous generation missed, has pushed the boundary of what is known slightly further into the territory of what is not. The Scan Pyramids project, which discovered the Big Void in 2017, is ongoing. New scanning technologies are being developed. New excavations continue at Giza and at other sites whose relationship to the pyramid complex may be closer than previously understood. There is still stone to turn, still data to analyze, and still questions to form that have not yet been asked. The pyramid endures. It is patient in a way that nothing human-made has any right to be patient, and it will outlast the current generation of researchers as it has outlasted every previous one. It will still be there, vast and angular against the Egyptian sky, when whatever answers eventually emerge have been incorporated into the textbooks of some future scholarship that will almost certainly revise them again in turn. For now, in the quiet of this particular night, on this particular side of the mystery, the most honest thing that can be said about the Great Pyramid is this: it was built by human beings who possessed knowledge we have not fully recovered. Knowledge of precision and mathematics and astronomy and logistics and stoneworking that was exceptional in its time and remains humbling in ours. Those human beings lived and worked and organized a project of staggering complexity at the edge of the desert in the noon heat of an African sun. They moved 2.5-ton blocks with a speed and accuracy that should not have been possible, and was anyway. They encoded in the proportions of their work a mathematical sophistication that took the rest of the world millennia to formalize, and when they were done, they left behind something so durable and so precise that it is still standing, still pointing north, still speaking in the language of stone to anyone patient enough to listen. The stone remembers. We are still learning what it is saying. Sam, there is one more thing worth staying with before sleep takes you. The casing stones. The Great Pyramid today looks nothing like it did when it was built. What we see now is the inner core, the rough limestone steps of the body, exposed and weathered, the familiar serrated silhouette against the Egyptian sky. But this was not how the pyramid was meant to appear. When it was new, the entire outer surface was encased in polished white Tura limestone, cut and fitted with the same extraordinary precision as the blocks beneath. The casing stones were angled to match the pyramid's slope exactly, their outer surfaces polished to a smoothness that would have caught the sun and reflected it across the plateau like a mirror. Ancient texts describe the pyramid as shining, as visible from great distances. It was something that seemed to belong more to the sky than to the ground. Almost all of those casing stones are gone now. They were quarried away during the medieval period to build mosques and fortifications in Cairo. The white limestone of the ancient pyramid became the building material of a new city. What was lost in that removal is not only the aesthetic, the visual transformation of the structure from a rough stepped mass to a smooth gleaming surface, but also information. Precision information. The outer surface of the casing stones carried the final expression of the pyramid's geometry, the precise angles and slopes that defined its form. Those stones are gone, repurposed, beyond recovery. What remains is what the stones themselves decided to keep. The core blocks, too heavy and too deeply embedded to be easily removed, now still hold their positions. The foundation, too precisely leveled to be dismissed, still measures to within half an inch of perfect flatness across 13 acres of bedrock. The king's chamber, too deep inside the structure to be conveniently quarried, still holds its granite ceiling beams and its mysterious shafts pointing at the stars they were aimed at 4,500 years ago. The pyramid gives up its information reluctantly, on its own timeline, in response to questions we were not always sophisticated enough to ask. Muon tomography found the big void because we finally had a technology sensitive enough to see it. Analysis of the shaft angles revealed the astronomical targeting because we finally thought to ask whether they were aimed at something specific. The papyri of Mera emerged from the desert at Wadi el-Jaf because someone dug in the right place at the right time. Each of these discoveries changed what we thought we knew. Each of them came decades or centuries after serious scholarly attention began. What will the next discovery change? What is in the pyramid that our current questions have not yet formed well enough to find? These are not rhetorical questions. They are real ones, and the people working on them. Geologists, physicists, archaeologists, mathematicians, historians are working on them tonight in labs and libraries and field sites with instruments and methods that would have astonished every previous generation of researchers. The mystery is alive. It is not the dead mystery of a question that has been settled and archived. It is the living mystery of something that keeps revealing new dimensions every time the tools of inquiry advance enough to look more closely. You are part of a civilization that has been asking about the pyramid for longer than most civilizations have existed. The Greeks visited it and were awed by it. The Romans studied it and debated its purpose. Medieval Arab scholars measured it and speculated about what it contained. Napoleon's scientists surveyed it and brought the results back to Europe, sparking a century of Egyptomania. Every era has looked at the pyramid through the lens of its own knowledge and come away with something, some new measurement, some new theory, some new appreciation of the gap between what it knows and what the stone knows. You are one moment in that long conversation. Your curiosity tonight, wherever it takes you, toward the mathematics, or the logistics, or the astronomical alignments, or the Sphinx's erosion, or the geological evidence, or simply the sheer incomprehensible fact of the thing itself. Your curiosity is continuous with everyone who has ever stood at the base of that structure and felt what you are feeling now. The pull of something that should not be as good as it is. The recognition that the past was more capable and more complex than the simplified version of history allows. The sense that there is something here worth understanding. Something that repays sustained attention with genuine revelation. The stone remembers. We are still learning what it is saying. Let the breath slow now. Let the image of the pyramid settle in the mind. Vast, still, oriented to the stars. Are you holding its secrets with the patience of something that has stood for 4,500 years and intends to stand for 4,500 more? You do not need to resolve the question tonight. The question does not need resolving tonight. It is enough to have held it, to have felt the weight of the stones in the imagination, to have sat for a while with one of the oldest mysteries the human world contains. The desert is quiet around the plateau. The stars that the pyramid was aligned to are still there, shifted slightly by the precession of the Earth's axis across the centuries, but still there, still burning, still tracing their ancient paths across the Egyptian night. Beneath them, the stone holds its questions with patience that no living thing can match. And here you are, breathing slowly in the dark, as human and as curious as any of the people who stood in the shadow of those stones across 4,000 years and felt, as you feel now, that something in that structure is asking something of us that we have not yet understood how to answer. Sleep well. The pyramid will still be there in the morning.